Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're diving into something that honestly gets overlooked way too often, but it's an absolutely essential tool in any analyst or researcher's toolkit. We're putting on our hard hats to explore the construction of a flawless statistical table from scratch. Now, I want you to think of this not just as formatting data, but as literal architecture. We are going to build a structure that takes raw, messy numbers and transforms them into a crystal clear narrative.
So let me ask you this. Have you ever stared down a massive, totally intimidating mountain of raw, fragmented data? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Hundreds of rows on a spreadsheet or survey results that just look like a giant wall of text and numbers. How do you possibly tame that kind of chaos? And more importantly, how do you make your boss, your professor, or your clients actually understand what they're looking at without their eyes completely glazing over? Handing someone raw data is like handing them a pile of bricks and calling it a house. It just doesn't work.
Well, enter our hero for today, tabulation. By definition, tabulation is the process of arranging collected data in an orderly manner in rows and columns to prepare it for interpretation. It's the ultimate translation tool. It takes the abstract and makes it totally concrete. Tabulation is really the structured blueprint that transforms that messy pile of bricks into a beautifully organized, easy-to-navigate building. Without it, you're just guessing. But with it, you're ready to analyze.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our architectural blueprint for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the power of tabulation. Then, our 4-step construction guide. Step 1, laying the foundation. Step 2, structural integrity. Step 3, visual clarity. And finally, Step 4, final polish.
Starting us off, Section 1, the power of tabulation.
Before we even think about pouring the concrete, you might be wondering, why not just write out our findings in a nice paragraph? Well, because tabulation provides 5 massive, load-bearing benefits that paragraphs literally cannot match. First, it offers a systematic presentation of data, condensing all that fragmentation into something concise. Second, it facilitates comparison. Placed in a simple table, comparing data becomes practically effortless. Third, identification of desired values. Need a specific number? Boom, you can locate it instantly in a grid. Fourth, it provides a crucial basis for analysis, because you really can't do heavy statistical lifting without tabular presentation first. And finally, it exhibits the trend of the data at a single glance. Patterns just jump right out at you.
Moving right along to Step 1, laying the foundation.
Just like a real building, a statistical table requires a rock-solid foundation before you can even think about putting a roof on it. That means getting the non-data elements right before pouring a single number into the grid. You've got to nail these 3 foundational steps. Number 1, write a self-explanatory title. Anyone looking at your table should know exactly what it describes immediately. Number 2, add a precise headnote. Tell your viewer the specific unit of measurement. Are we talking thousands of dollars, percentages, miles? Never make them guess. And number 3, create brief, clear stubs and captions. In table terminology, stubs are your row titles and captions are your column titles. You can even number your columns to make referring to them super easy later on.
Let's actually look at the contrast here in practice. Imagine a row labeled the total amount of revenue generated in the 4th quarter. I mean, that's incredibly vague and wordy. It completely clutters the space. Now contrast that with a brief, clear heading like simply Q4 revenue. The difference is night and day, right? A brief heading instantly improves readability and lets the data itself take center stage. You shouldn't force your reader to hack through a jungle of words just to figure out what a row means. All right, on to Step 2, structural integrity. This is where we frame the actual grid, and this brilliantly illustrates the power of proper ruling and alignment. Notice how lines clearly separate the columns, drawn at the top, bottom, and right below the captions. It gives the data incredible strength. But really look closely at the numbers themselves. Look at how the decimal points are perfectly aligned vertically. Look at the plus and minus signs, lined up flawlessly. This isn't just about making things look pretty. Perfect alignment prevents the eye from wandering and ensures the data can be scanned rapidly without any confusion at all.
The next part of structural integrity is what I like to call strategic placement. If you have 2 columns or 2 rows that are specifically meant to be compared with one another, structurally place them right next to each other. It's just basic human psychology. You want to minimize visual travel for your viewer. If I have to look at column 1 and then mentally drag my eyes all the way across the screen to column 7 just to compare 2 related figures, you've already lost me. Keep related data neighbors.
Furthermore, any strong structure needs support beams. In tabulation, your support beams are your derived data.
You absolutely should incorporate accurate totals and subtotals at appropriate places. But don't stop there. Weave in derived data like ratios, percentages, and averages. These act as incredible contextual anchors. They tell the viewer what the raw numbers actually mean in relation to one another, saving them the mental heavy lifting of doing all the math themselves.
Which brings us to step 3, visual clarity.
So, we have our foundation, and we have our structural grid. Now we need to make sure the space is actually livable by preventing viewer fatigue. The absolute golden rule of thumb here is 4 to 5. Never, ever display more than 4 to 5 characteristics in a single table. If you try to cram in age, income, location, job title, marital status, and, their favorite pizza topping all into one massive grid, you're going to cause total confusion. It's too overcrowded. If you have more than 5 characteristics, do everyone a favor and just build a second table.
Beyond limiting the characteristics, we also need to naturally direct the viewer's attention. Think about it like an architect using targeted lighting to highlight a home's best features. You should use spacing and indentation to emphasize important categories in your table. Different type spacing, bolding, or just intelligently shifting a subcategory slightly to the right with an indent, it beautifully highlights relative significance. It tells the viewer's brain, hey, pay attention to this hierarchy before they even read a single word.
And finally, step 4, final polish.
This is where we cross the line from a purely functional table to a truly professional one. These finishing touches are absolutely crucial. One of the biggest giveaways of an amateur table is the overuse of confusing shorthand. Let's contrast that with the pro approach. If you absolutely must explain a detail or if an abbreviation is completely unavoidable, explain it clearly in the footnotes at the bottom. Contrast that with the sloppy practice of using unexplained abbreviations or worse, ditto marks. You know those little quotation marks people use to say same as above? Yeah, scratch that. Ditto marks should be avoided entirely in a professional statistical table. They look messy and introduce way too much room for error.
Our last piece of polish, clear references. A perfect structure is always built on verifiable materials. So if you're using secondary data, meaning data you didn't collect yourself, the sources must be clearly stated. This isn't optional, it's a must. By dropping a clear source note at the bottom, you allow anyone reading it to verify the reliability of your data. It builds trust. And a table without trust is honestly just a grid of meaningless numbers. So, what does this all mean for you? Well, take a hard look at your most recent data project. Does it truly meet the criteria of a perfect statistical table? Did you stick to the golden rule of 4 to 5 characteristics? The next time you face a mountain of raw data, remember this 4-step blueprint. Because if data is the ultimate truth in business and research, we have to ask ourselves, if our structural foundation is weak, is anyone actually going to believe the story our numbers are trying to tell? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. See you next time.